What's up, guys? My name is Ozzy, and this is Bottled and Bond. What's up, guys? Welcome to a special show of Bottled and Bond. Today, I want to go over a quick, brief history of what many people like to question, and that is the difference between whiskey and whisky. So there's a difference in how you spell it. Obviously, whiskey, W-H-I-S-K-Y. And then you add an E for the other one, W-H-I-S-K-E-Y. There's not much of a difference, but I want to explain a few things just to go into history just a bit. This video is going to be very quick, so just follow along and learn something new today. So here's the thing. Both whiskey and whisky are made from fermented grain mash, which is where we get the mash bill from, right? Now this includes barley, corn, rye, and wheat. The only difference when it comes to rye bourbon as opposed to a regular bourbon is the mash bill. So where you would have at least 51% of the corn for a typical bourbon, now you have at least 51% of the rye for a rye bourbon. Just like anything else, is typically aged in white oak casks and also charred. Not all of them, but for the most part, they're all charred. The only difference in the whiskey and the whisky is the type of grains they use, the distillation process, and of course the aging process, how long it's in that cask. So a little bit of history. The first evidence of whiskey in Ireland dates back to 1405, and the first evidence of whiskey in Scotland, or as I like to say, Scotland, dates back to 1494. So there's a lot more details that come into play when it comes to the history. There's James IV of Scotland. There's King Henry VIII of Ireland, I believe. There's monks involved when they get the distillation from one location back to their homes, so they can start, making profit from the distillation from the whiskeys. So since 1608, Old Bushmill Distillery has had the license to distill whiskey, making them the oldest licensed distillery in the world. Well, unfortunately, then came the English Malt Tax of 1725, where pretty much the government came into play and took away banned the sales, right, of whiskey distillation and all that. So now what they were having to do is they were having to distill at nighttime, where the obscurity of nighttime pretty much hid the smoke of the distillation of the stills, which is where the term moonshine actually came to be, and because of they did it throughout the nighttime when the moon was out, and that's pretty much how the term moonshine came to be. There's a lot more that goes into play with that, a lot more detailed names and everything trailed into the tied to the history. But believe it or not, during the American Revolutionary War, whiskey was used as a form of currency. So I mean, I go up to somebody and I say, hey man, I'm out of ammunition, here's some whiskey, let me get some rounds. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it went, but I just thought I'd throw it in there. Also, George Washington, our very own president, George Washington, had his very own distillery that he operated. And of course, we know about Prohibition, which went from 1920 to 1933, where sales were banned, and they were only allowed to distill, bottle, and sell for medicinal purposes. So if I walked in there and said, I need some whiskey. So behind me, I got 3 quick examples that I wanted to show you guys from whiskeys and whiskeys, right? It's kind of funny saying it because I'm saying it the same way, although it's spelled different. The first bottle I have is a Johnnie Walker Black Label. This is aged for 12 years. It is at an 80 proof, 40% alcohol by volume. So this bottle itself is a blended Scotch whiskey and is bottled and was blended and bottled in Scotland, making it a whiskey. Second bottle I want to go over is this Basil Hayden's. Basil Hayden's is also an 80 proof, 40% ABV, and this is actually a whiskey bourbon. It's actually distilled and bottled in Claremont and Frankfort, Kentucky, and believe it or not, I remember drinking this bottle. It was pretty good, so definitely recommend it. I'll be reviewing Basil Hayden's later on this year, more towards the Christmas time. And the last bottle I want to talk about is the Glenlivet. And the Glenlivet is a whiskey. It's a single malt Scotch whiskey, also at an 80 proof, 40% ABV. And this whiskey is matured and bottled in Scotland, making it a whiskey. So the whiskey and the whiskey, they have different tastes, but like I said, it's just based on the grains, the corn, the rye, the wheat, all that, and how long it's aged for in the distillation process. It's what gives it the different flavors between a regular bourbon whiskey or just a typical whiskey such as Jack Daniels, as opposed to a whiskey from Scotland. Besides that difference, to be completely honest with you, the only thing I'll say is that if you're gonna mention whiskey, you're probably more than likely talking about a Canadian whiskey, a Scottish whiskey, or a whiskey that distilled in Japan. And if you're gonna talk about whiskey, there's a good chance you're talking about an Irish whiskey, or in reference to any other whiskey and bourbons that we distill here in our great land of the US of A. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. Quick brief history on the differences between whiskey and whiskey. Not very detailed. Go ahead and share your comments below. Hit the subscribe button and the like button, and go ahead and hit the little bell so that you get notifications for any of my future videos. Stay tuned for this Friday, where we will be reviewing a rye bourbon whiskey. Don't miss out on that on our Friday mix-up. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. And as always, cheers.